Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Here is the remaining part for the theory of aggregate demand, which is movements along aggregate demand curve. For the movements along aggregate demand curve, let's take an example of the US economy. Here you can see at y-axis, you can see the price level, and at the x-axis, you can see the real GDP in billions. You can see the arrows shows downward from A to B, because this is a situation when prices are fallen, and when prices fall, then there is increase in real GDP or increase in real output. So here I'm going to explain with the two different situations. So the first situation is when prices falls. When prices falls, so you can say this is the situation when country is facing deflation. So we can say the aggregate demand curve or the movements along the aggregate demand curve is due to the three situations, which is wealth effect, real interest rate effect, and the net exports. For the wealth effect, you can say when average price level of goods and services fall, the people real wealth increases as their value of assets increases, or in other words, they feel wealthier because now they have more wealth or they have more money. So the real GDP increases because consumption increases. Because when people have more money, they can consume more, or they can purchase more things. So when they consume, when their consumption increases, that means your real GDP increases from 2,000 to $3,000 billion. So the next situation is there is movement along the aggregate demand curve due to the real interest rate effect. So this is a situation when price level decreases from 150 to 100 points, because this is a situation when bank lowers interest rate to increase investment level or to increase consumption level, because you know the consumption and investment level is the component of the GDP. So when bank lowers interest rate, so overall consumption and investment increases. This means the real GDP increases from 2000 to 3000. So the next effect when prices falls in the deflation situation, in net exports, when price level decreases from 150 to 100, you can say when foreigners demand increases in goods and services. So the domestic consumer will consume more, so quantity demanded and output increases. Here you can see from 2000 to 3000. So this is a situation when price level falls from 150 to 100 and real GDP increases or output increases from 2000 to 3000 billion dollars from point A to B. So this situation will call movement along the aggregate demand curve. Now move to the next slide, which is continuation of the previous slide. This is the reverse situation of the previous slide. Here you can say when price level increases from 100 to 50, the overall GDP decreases from 3000 to 2000. It is due to the three situations, because this is a situation when price increases, you can say the country is facing inflation or high level of inflation. So the first point is wealth effect. You can say when average price level of goods and services increases from 100 to 150, let's say, the people real wealth decreases because now they have less money, so their value of assets decreases because they have less money. So in other words, they feel not wealthier. So in this situation, we will say the real GDP declines or decreases because now people will consume less and their consumption power will decline. So in this situation, the overall real GDP will decreases from 3000 to 2000. So the second effect is real interest rate effect. In this situation, when price level increases from 100 to 150, so this is a situation when bank, you can say the state bank or the central bank wants to increase the interest rate due to some of this because due to the some of the situations, maybe you can say due to the political instability, maybe there's change in technology, so they want to gather more taxes from people. So in this situation, when bank increases interest rate, so overall consumption and investment decreases. In this situation, people can consume less because there is less investment opportunities. When there is less investment opportunities in the country, people will face unemployment situation, they can lose their jobs, so the overall GDP declines from 3000 to 2000. So the next point is the net export. When price level increases from 100 to 150, so the foreign demand decreases in goods and services, so the domestic consumer will not consume more, so the quantity demanded and output decreases from A to B. So here you can say the movements to the upper side, but this is movement along the aggregate demand curve. Now move to the next slide, which is shift in aggregate demand. In shift in aggregate demand, you can see there are four situations where aggregate demand curve shifts. The first one is changes in consumption, then changes in investment, changes in government or taxes, or changes in net exports. By looking at the diagram, if you recall when you studied in microeconomics, the simple demand curve, there you studied when price level decreases, the demand curve increases or it shifts upward, or if the price level increases, the demand curve shifts downward. So this is the same situation in the macroeconomics, because macroeconomics is a study of the whole economy. So when this is a study of the whole economy, you will say this is an aggregate demand curve. So when there's change in consumption, when price level decreases, aggregate demand curve will increases as people consume more goods and services. So the aggregate demand curve shifts from AD to AD1, or you can say it will shift to rightward. In reverse situation, when price level increases, so when price increases, aggregate demand decreases as people consume less goods and services. So the aggregate demand curve shifts downward from AD to AD2. So the next point is change in investment. If investment increases, so aggregate demand shifts upward from AD to AD1. Or if there's less investment opportunities in the country, or if an investment is down in the country, so overall the aggregate demand curve will shift upward, or you can say the leftward. Now the third point is changes in government or taxes. If taxes decreases, so the consumption will increase, investment will also increase, so the aggregate demand curve will shift upward to AD1. But in reverse situation, if taxes increases, so consumption will decrease and investment will decrease as well, so the aggregate demand will shift downward to AD2. So what happens to the government spending? Here you can say if government spending increases, let's say Government is spending to buy more aircrafts, or they are spending on military. So the aggregate demand curve will shift upward from 80 to 81. So the last point is changes in net exports. So when exports increases in the country, when export increases, that means country is in good economic situation. Their output will increases, so the aggregate demand curve increases as well. But in reverse situation, if exports are decreases, then aggregate demand curve will decreases as well from 80 to 82. Now what happens to the import? When import increases, aggregate demand curve will increases as well. And when import decreases, AD curve will shift downward as well. I hope you will understand it. Allah Hafiz.